Welcome into episode 408 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, when you look at the calendar and the schedule and the way that things have gone this season, you see Bruins versus Islanders Thursday night at the Garden. Well, it doesn't really stack up to, let's say U.S. Canada at the Garden last week. It's kind of a boring game on the schedule. Even for
speak for yourself.
Yeah. We kind of knew it was going to be a bit of a dull game. Hopefully not, but it ended up being such. So, I was thinking of the two of you though, because we actually talked about last episode how Marchand has made comments about, if we just, we're right there and all these things that he's just kind of being optimistic like a captain would do. Like what else is he going to say type thing. And then last night, I'm not going to get into it because I'll save it for Scott, but I'll just say this, what was your guys' reaction? And were you leaving the Garden thinking to yourselves like, oh, finally, like some efforts of going to the locker room, getting comments and actually getting some good honesty? And should he have been so honest? Let's get into it.
Yeah. I'll just go right into my opening shift because that's exactly what it is. Brad Marchand after the game, as you said, like he's been struck a tone of optimism all year long. Even just earlier this week said, I think we can do some damage if we get in. And then last night after a fifth straight loss, while he still pointed out that they played well, which they outshot the Islanders 38-20. They were up 16-2 in shots before the Islanders made it 1-0 completely against the run of play. And he said we're going to fight and claw to try to make the playoffs. He also really for the first time acknowledged, at least publicly, that this season might not go the way that they want. He said, you don't always achieve every goal you're shooting for, but that's what builds great bonds and great friendships when you go through this adversity together. We're doing that. Obviously, it hasn't been the season that we've wanted, and we haven't had the success that we would have liked this time of year, but the good thing is that we're coming together over it. At the end of the day, we may not achieve what we hope to this year, but that doesn't mean that we can't build for something greater and bring it back next year. So we're going to work every single day to continue to improve and build our game, and we're going to claw and fight every single day to get in the playoffs. Obviously, just not how you usually hear players talk, especially the captain of the team, and especially based on the way Marchand has talked every other point throughout the season.
But it felt genuine. Like it felt almost refreshingly honest. Like it's not. I didn't think he was throwing in the towel, but I felt like at least there was some like actual thought that went into it rather than just like copy and paste what I should say, the right, like about being optimistic where it was more realistic.
Yeah. So I tweeted the video out, obviously got a lot of reaction on social media. And yeah, I think it's going to, obviously I'll leave it here for the opening shift, but I think it's definitely worth getting into, what we thought of the comments, some of the reactions, because there's really been people on both sides. There's been people, appreciating the honesty and saying like, that sounds like a leader and sounds like someone who wants to stick around to be part of the fix. And then on the other side, there's been criticism of, how can the captain of the team talk like this when they're still only 4 points out of a playoff spot with 22 games to go. So, pretty divided response to it.
I think it's just awareness. Like I didn't see anything wrong with the answer. Obviously, both Scott and I were there asking questions and in person hearing the answers. So we understand the full context of the tone and the backdrop of it being after a 5-game losing streak. And some of those games were in overtime, so they got a few points, but 5 losses in a row and you're not going to be people would see it as disingenuous, and Bruins fans aren't stupid, like to be talking about, oh, this is great. Like I actually found Sacco's comments more frustrating because he said there's positives. And I'm just sitting there like there was very few questions asked to him because it felt like Tuesday was the same story, right? They outplayed Toronto, they lose. So I feel like people just didn't ask him questions yesterday, but he said, there's a lot of positives, and I'm just sitting back in my chair going, you don't need positives, you need points. Like, it's about points right now. So I prefer the Marchand answer, but we'll get more into that later. My opening shift has to do with what we talked about at the end of last episode in somewhat of an argument, which is Oliver Wahlstrom got waived after, he became a point of debate, I guess. He became somebody that people noticed for the wrong reasons. And a lot of people were ready to see that experiment come to a close. Brian wasn't. I think, how was lunch, by the way?
Lunch was good. I picked up the tab actually. So
I thought it was really touching that you set up that going away party for him right outside Warrior.
Well, I even look. It was a tough day for the Wally gang, and I even had a conversation with Sweeney, and I said, "Look, just give the kid the opening, the center ice stretch after practice. Just let him have his final moment." Yeah, no, Wahlstrom gets waived, and I don't want to come into your opening shift, Bridget, unless you're given the floor quickly. But in all sincerity, him being waived, I have no issue with. So I don't want to cause any confusion. My only argument last episode was, like, of all people, I'm not like, I wasn't getting my panties in a bunch over Oliver Wahlstrom's shortcomings. There's other players that I wanted to talk about with that same energy, and that's all that it was. It was less about Wahlstrom and more about let's carry this piss and vinegar towards some of the other players that we have expectations for, not a mid-season waiver claim that isn't much of anything for this team anyway. And by the way, he gets waived, which is great. Now, again, we're best friends, so hopefully he doesn't hear this, but you would think it would open up an opportunity for some call-ups, or at least one from Providence. And we haven't seen that at practice today. And I'll just quickly lead us into my opening shift, which is there could have been another opportunity for a call-up because Matt Poitras got hurt in the Islanders game last night. And this is also something online that, was causing some debate a little bit. It should be worth noting Poitras is back at practice today. But it was a weird play last night in the game. Brock Nelson, not known to be a dirty player to my understanding. Matt Poitras, not a dirty player, doesn't really get into many altercations either. But the Islanders' backup goaltender was opening the gate at the bench for a teammate who was changing, and to the goaltender's left, behind like the glass, Nelson and Poitras were kind of coming, and Nelson gave him a bit of a little rabbit cross check, and Poitras ended up going in kind of rib first into the open door, and it kind of seemed like the perfect storm of unfortunate circumstances. But of course, there's the fair question of, should the goaltender have had more recognition of his surroundings? Why did Nelson make that play? Should the Islanders have gotten more than just a 2-minute minor on the play? And it appears as though, as far as Poitras' health goes, the Bruins kind of dodged the bullet there for his sake and their sake. But a weird play behind the play. I was at the game last night. You guys are at the games all the time, and I don't think maybe Scott may have noticed, but nobody knew what was happening. It looked like there may have been a health issue on the bench, but in any event, strange play. But Poitras is back at practice.
Yeah, which is a relief, because that plays like that, that could have been ugly. A hit into an open door is just, it's so dangerous. Obviously they've taken so many precautions in other areas of the rink to prevent kind of really blunt collisions, right? The glass is rounded off now instead of the straight on stanchion that Pacioretty hit once upon a time. Stuff like that. The open door is one thing where there's just not much you can do about it. It's there's going to be sharp edges. It's jagged edge. There's no way to hit that and have the blow not hurt.
It's fortunate that he wasn't bent over a little bit more, because if he had hit his ribs into that, I think we're talking about broken ribs, but I think it got a little bit lower. So I think that maybe saved him what could have been a even more serious injury.
Yeah, and they did announce it as lower body, so also kind of lends itself to maybe it was hip or groin area or something that hit it, or a Charlie horse, like whatever.
It
But yeah,
seemed like it was worse than just like wind knocked out of you. Like I'm sure that was part of it, but I think I thought I saw it like lower, like in the stomach is what it kind of looked like to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, like they took him off down the Islanders tunnel. Like he didn't even go back out on the ice and go onto the Bruins bench. Like the Bruins trainer and the Islanders trainer, they help him down the tunnel right there.
Yeah. I mean, there really was no reason to go back on the ice. Like we know, like those tunnels lead to the same hallway. So it was, just the easier.
Yeah, it just like in the moment, like I don't know about you guys, but like in the moment, you're just scared that it's like more of a serious emergency because there was clearly like a rush to like get him down the tunnel and get treatment. So seems like probably was just in a lot of pain. I'm sure he has a really nice bruise today, but nothing more serious than that, which is good to see.
Yeah, and the reason why, like, we wanted to record a little bit earlier, but we decided to wait because we wanted to see if he was on the ice for practice and we wanted to see if anybody got called up. But the first reporting I saw from Mark Diver down at Providence Bruins practice was that both Lysell and Merkulov were accounted for there. And so
and notably, like everyone else too. So
yeah,
it doesn't seem like anyone's missing.
Crew was accounted for according to Mark Diver, who is kind of like the main person I get my information from regarding the Providence Bruins side of things. And if people don't follow him, that's a good follow for if you're wondering like about call-ups. Normally he has like, nope, they're on the ice today. So yeah, there's no call-ups. So that means Poitras probably playing. Seems like he's good to go. Otherwise, if he wasn't, they wouldn't have a roster. They wouldn't have a full roster. They would be playing down a forward. So he clearly is good to go, I guess, in that way. And it seems like they could have still called someone up. They still had a roster.
I would argue they should. Like,
yeah, they have roster spots available for a call-up, so it's not like they're out of room. And also, at any point in time, like could change out the past call-ups for new call-ups. So yeah, I think that we were talking about the Wahlstrom situation last week. I thought that the waiving of Wahlstrom would come in parallel with a recall of another forward, and it did not. And also, I think what was confusing about the Wahlstrom waiving timing was obviously it came after he had kind of a rough game and just wasn't playing well, but we kind of thought he was just supposed to be there till after they traded some guys away. But they obviously have other bodies that they could call up from Providence that would do just as good, if not better. So it was unnecessary to wait any longer to waive him.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to get into Scott's opening shift first. I think there's a lot of meat on that bone. But before we do, I don't know how you guys feel watching from high up above, but watching the game last night, and especially in person, it's like you watch the team out there and you can very much notice that they're missing their top two defensemen. When you watch this decor, you're like, you see the personnel and you could just tell that they're undermanned on the back end. But you have that same feeling watching the forward group. The only difference is the defense is missing McAvoy and Lindholm, and the forward group was just missing Frederick. Don't you guys, you understand what I'm saying? Like, you watch this team, and it's like, they're not missing anybody. This is who they have, like, when they're fully healthy, minus Frederick. And this is pre-Poitras going down. And I don't know. It's so glaring, like, that they just don't. I mean, yes, their numbers back it up. We've seen it all year that they're not a good offensive team. But you watch them in person, and you're like, okay, you got Pastrnak. It's like, all right, and then Marchand if he's feeling it on a shift, and then maybe Geeky on a shift. But it's like Lindholm, Coyle, like Zacha, like they just aren't. And then beyond them, it's just so evident that this team just lacks personnel.
Well,
yeah, and we should know.
because Marchand, that's where those Marchand comments come from. Like, we'll get them, we're going to get people in the off season and come back at it stronger next year, like fill in some of the gaps maybe. And also I thought that he sounded like a guy who thinks he's staying. So there's at least like there was that element coming out of it. He was speaking as if he's going to be here next year, which this whole week we're kind of waiting to see if there's an extension before the trade deadline because it's something Sweeney talked about. So that was another one of my takeaways from Marchand. But sorry, Scott.
Yeah, and we should note that Trent Frederick is out week to week. That is also news that has come down since the last time we recorded. So like he's not coming back this weekend. So you have 2 road games back-to-back days, and right now you have 12 forwards on the roster. So you would think there'd be a call no matter what, just to have an extra body, like in case something happens Saturday, and then you're not, flying someone to Minnesota late Saturday night, like they would already be with the team. And that could happen. So like we're recording right around noon on Friday as practice is probably just about wrapping up. That they're going to have a flight to Pittsburgh later Friday afternoon. In theory, one of these guys who's practicing down in Providence can meet them at the plane and still be called up. And there could also be an element of waiting until Wahlstrom officially comes off the books, which will happen at 2:00 when he'll either be claimed or clear waivers and get sent down to Providence. So there still could be a move before they actually fly out to Pittsburgh. And really, like I said, there should be. What are we doing with this third line? Even if Poitras is healthy, like it's a 0. They're just getting absolutely nothing from the third line right now. And, if we want to pick on like low-hanging fruit for a second straight podcast, like why is Riley Tufte on the third line? Why are they doing this? He's not even close to a third liner in the NHL. He's a complete 0. He has now played 5 games in Boston this season. You want to guess how many shots on goal he has?
1.
0.
Oof.
He has not landed a single shot on goal in 5 games.
Oof.
He's playing 7-8 minutes a game. Those are like 12th forward numbers, not third line top 9 numbers. I mean, like it's just silly. Like it's legitimate. It's like legitimately just like malpractice to roll that out as a third line. You have to try something else.
It seems like Don Sweeney is literally doing everything he can to not call up some of these younger players that we all want them to. And in particular, Merkulov. You can look at Lysell and say his numbers aren't as good as Merkulov's, and he's like, but like Merkulov probably deserves it the most. And then Lysell, we just kind of want to see what he can do. Can you sink or swim? But
also like development at the NHL level, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't think Tufte, they're not getting anything out of Tufte, and Tufte's not really getting as much out of it because he's already he's not a prospect anymore. Whereas Lysell, first of all, his 1 game didn't look terrible. Looked like he was keeping up. There's a value in that to first of all not create a sour relationship with those 2 and to get them more NHL experience. Merkulov has a little bit more, but he hasn't still seen extended time in the NHL. And there's no argument that I think Sweeney could make that we would agree with why Tufte is in over Merkulov at this point. I don't really think that there's like a, hey, maybe we didn't think of this. We're not at that point in the season anymore. It's time to give these guys a chance. And we've said, how many times this year do you think we've said we should keep track next season?
But here's my question. And by the way, this is coming from a preseason Riley Tufte fan in Bridget. So she's
because I mean, we were all still just like learning about new players at that point in time and like trying to make our first like judgments on it. And the role that I thought he could play, he just not that good at executing. Like he's a big guy, seems strong on the forecheck, like turning pucks over, like kind of like what Kastelik does, but he just doesn't do it as well.
Well, and so Scott, to your point, I want to ask this question because something I've seen online, whether it's fans, media, and everything in between, over the course of the season is, well, when as it pertains to Providence call-ups, people want Lysell and Merkulov up, or let's just say Merkulov first and foremost. And then they'll call up a Max Jones or, a Riley Tufte or a Vinny whatever. And Vinny Lettieri actually has produced in Providence, so he's earned his call-ups. But they'll call up a Max Jones and a Riley Tufte, and somebody will say, well, why is he getting called up? And the response will be, well, because they're calling him up for a fourth line role, and you want to be calling up Merkulov or Lysell for a fourth line role. But to your point, Scott, last night they have Tufte on the third line. It's Tufte, Poitras, and Brazeau. So it's like you can't even make that argument. And by the way, I don't even like that argument, but I understand it and it's true. But this is a situation where you didn't call up to be a fourth liner. You called up to be a third liner. Why? What has he done in Providence to earn this? And that's why I feel like there's something behind the scenes regarding these younger players, Lysell and Merkulov, and management. I don't know if they jive. I don't know if they're bitching. I don't know what's going on. But there seems to be a clear, agenda to do anything besides call these guys up for an extended look.
Well, and I know why Riley Tufte got called, but he had been playing really well in Providence. Like, he was on a good stretch down there. But it's just like it's two completely different levels where, okay, yeah, a guy like Riley Tufte or Vinny Lettieri, who, they're more or less done with their development. Like, they pretty much are what they are. And what they are, good AHLers and kind of tweeners who have not really stuck in the NHL for a reason. And so to think that, you're the team that suddenly struck gold and these guys are going to develop into effective NHLers at age 26 or 28 or 29 or whatever, in the case of Lettieri, it's like, no, that they're not going to be anything all that different than what they've been in the past. Whereas
they did the younger, same thing with Wahlstrom.
Right. Whereas the younger guys, it's like, no, there's an actual upside there where they might be more than just plug them in and okay, I guess they're fine for a few games. You want to see if those guys can actually stick and make an impact and get better at the NHL level. And look, I'm a proponent. I've said before, I push back on the idea that they're rotting in Providence. I think one of our listeners used in a mailbag question, no, I think you get better in the AHL, and I think anytime you spend there is valuable. So I don't, I don't think it's like, oh, Georgi Merkulov has nothing else to prove. Like I said it before, you always have something to prove. But I'm just talking about what helps the Boston Bruins, not just short term, but moving forward. And it's giving these young guys a shot. And again, you're getting nothing from your bottom six anyways, from your third line anyways. So they might provide a short-term boost that might actually help you if you have any, illusions of still making a push for a playoff spot. You need to get something from your third line. And it also benefits you longer term because you can get to the end of the season with a better idea of, whether Georgi Merkulov is an NHLer or if he's closer to a tweener, or whether Fabian Lysell is close to being NHL ready and perhaps making an impact for you. You can start to get an answer to those questions now, between now and the end of the regular season, and not have to go into the off season with as many questions around those guys.
Yeah, I mean, think about this lineup, right? This is actually something someone commented on one of Scott's posts from just about nobody being called up. And it was a comment by a guy named Mark Larardi, if I'm saying that right. And this is the lineup he said he wants: Geeky Zakapasta, Marchand, Lindholm, Lysell, Merkulov, Poitras, Coyle, Koepke, Beecher, Kastelik. I don't see anything wrong with those lines. I feel like
can you say that again, Bridget? You read it kind of quick.
Geeky Zakapasta, so same first line.
Yep.
Marchand, Lindholm, Lysell.
Mm-hmm.
Merkulov, Poitras, Coyle.
Mm-hmm.
And then Koepke, Beecher, Kastelik, so same fourth line.
So what's interesting about those lines is it's omitting Justin Brazeau, who I was just going to mention real quick. He has 3 points since the start of 2025, and tomorrow's March 1st. Now, I know there was a couple weeks break because of the Four Nations, but he has 3 points since January 1st, and he has 0 points in his last 10. Like, so in addition to calling up a guy like Tufte, who, to Scott's point, like, has been playing good hockey, but like Merkulov also playing good hockey for 2 years down there. And I know that you're not saying that, Scott, but like, so Tufte comes up, okay. But even a guy like Brazeau, it's like, he's not a third line guy at this point based off of his performance. So why is he not on the fourth line? Or like, it's just, there's so much room for years, guys, for years. The Boston Bruins have been a team where if you're in the minors in Providence, there's no room on that roster because it's just too deep and too talented. This is the quintessential NHL roster where you try to make some call-ups to see what people can do because the roster is not good enough. And there's been a stubbornness to go with safe players, safe bets to try to assure a playoff opportunity. And only recently has management and players kind of come out and said like what we've all been saying, which is, yeah, okay, but is it really a playoff team? But then again, they still haven't called up some of these younger guys. And maybe what Scott said a few weeks ago is true, or a few episodes ago, where like trade deadline comes, spots open up. I just don't know why they're waiting. Like, what is it about this NHL roster right now that's helping them get closer to the playoffs, as opposed to some of these younger kids that have some upside? Like, seriously. So let's just say hypothetically Merkulov or Lysell come up and one of them turns the puck over and at least a scoring chance against. Okay. How is that any different than what the roster is doing right now? Except the roster up right now can't score outside of 88 and 39.
And can't score on the power play, which I know they scored 2, which was an anomaly on Tuesday, but like by and large this season have struggled on the power play. Guy like Fabian Lysell maybe helps there. And
or probably Merkulov even more. Like,
yeah, then Merkulov.
Providence's power play runs through Merkulov.
Yeah, there's other options. There's not like seeing the same thing over and over fail over and over in Boston. It's like, why isn't there some other infusion of a different, someone with different perspective, someone who hasn't been stuck in this stagnant power play, like has maybe fresh ideas, or at least isn't as down, like discouraged about what's been going on, and is looking for an opportunity and looking to impress, and going out there every shift trying to earn a spot. So I think if you look at those lines the way that I said them, it's putting people in roles that feel natural for them. Like Lysell with Marchand and Lindholm could work. Like, he's not a fourth liner. Great. He's in the middle six in this situation. Merkulov on the third line in this situation. Like, those seem like spots that fit. And if it's at the expense of Justin Brazeau, who hasn't done a lot recently, then I don't see an issue with that.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious thing that would change there is you're not right now. Sacco uses Marchand and Lindholm Coyle as a matchup line. They get a lot of defensive zone shifts.
Well, you're
not doing that if Lysell's on it.
Yeah, but you could even choose to put Coyle on that line rather than Lindholm and switch Lindholm to the third line.
Or maybe try to hide.
Either way, if Lysell's on, it's not a defensive line.
You're right.
Or maybe you could try to pick us. Maybe you could try to spot him some offensive zone draws. And then maybe, I don't know, quick shifts or something. But I mean,
Like, either way though, like it's worth giving guys a shot. And Brazeau might be gone a week from now anyways. Right. Like, it seems like there is still some trade interest in him, even though he has struggled as much as he has. I feel like you're probably not getting anything more than like a mid-round pick, but it's still something. I would say for the same reasons that we're all talking, like, does Brazeau even need to be in the lineup, or, you wouldn't really miss him? Like, that's also why the Bruins might not re-sign him. He's heading to unrestricted free agency. They might decide that there's other guys they want to give that roster spot to. So if you can get a 4th round pick, then like you might as well take it.
Not bad for somebody who was in the East Coast League a few years ago, right? Yeah. Like, to turn that into a mid-round pick. So, like, I guess here's my concern, guys. Like, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, in years past, the Bruins were a contending team, and they were a contending team for about 15 to almost 20 years straight of like they're kind of a contender or close to it. And if you're in Providence, you understand that, right? It is what it is. But right now in 2025, if you're a Providence Bruins player, don't you feel like Bruins management right now, given the situation of the NHL roster personnel and how it's not good enough, the poor play on the ice from September and preseason to now, and they have been unwilling to give the higher end prospects an extended look when they've played well. If you're in Providence, don't you think that's sending a bad message? Like, if I play for the Providence Bruins, I could play really well and I won't get an opportunity for one reason or the other, because at least to this point, because this is not a contending Bruins team. And as I said, I'm very annoyed, and I have been very annoyed the last few months with Sweeney in particular and the Bruins management staff, because I just feel as though that they were looking out for the betterment of their personal job security, and I don't fault them for it. Like, I'm criticizing, but I understand if I'm Don Sweeney, you want to try to make the playoffs, and because that's good for your job security, right? I just feel like in doing so, they were trying to put out a lineup that was just very conservative, very safe rather than risky. But I just felt that they kind of managed themselves overcautiously to a point of fault, because to have this lineup out there that can't score, it's actually hurting what they were trying to do, and infusing some youth with some scoring upside would have helped them get to those playoffs. So I feel like it's actually kind of biting them in the ass a little bit. But if you're a Providence player, or an AHL player, and you're getting traded to Providence or picked up by the Bruins and sent to Providence, and you look at the Bruins track record with calling up, younger players, certainly right now where they're just not a good NHL team, how do you feel? Do you feel encouraged that if you play well down in Providence, you'll get rewarded? If you're an unfinished prospect like Merkulov or Lysell has been, because you mentioned like they'll call up Tufte or Terry because they are who they are at this point. I just think I think Sweeney has sent a bad message to younger players playing for this team or this organization.
So, yeah, I mean, maybe to an extent, but I mean, they have gotten looks. Like, it's not like Merkulov and Lysell, like neither of them have ever been called up. Like Merkulov has
one time
played
though, like one game,
7
like
NHL games.
Merk has, but like Fabian that was a political play because his parents were in town.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, Merkulov has, and Poitras made the team. So Poitras is an example of somebody who did make the team.
With all due respect to Fabian Lysell, he got his call up, and now he has 4 points in his last 11 games down in Providence. Like, not exactly forcing their hand. So, kind of two different things. Like Merkulov, I'll just focus on Merkulov because he's the one who is still playing really well down in Providence. 17 points in his last 17 games. 2 points Wednesday night in their most recent game. Again, like I guess I'm stopping short of getting too worked up because I still think there's a chance that 2:00 today we get the notification that Bruins have Oliver Wahlstrom cleared waivers. Bruins have assigned him to Providence and called up Georgi Merkulov. So, like, I just don't want to get too worked up when like this move could happen and an hour and a half after we finish recording.
When does that ever happen to the skate pod, Scott?
Never.
I know, right? But yeah, look, if we get to the end of this year and Merkulov hasn't played another NHL game or has only got 1 or 2 games and sent back down, then absolutely, I would be totally on board with ripping the Bruins management of him. I'd be on board with him saying I want to trade or going back to Russia or whatever he decides to do. Like, that would be an extremely frustrating situation. But if he gets called up now or in a week at the deadline and gets 18, 20 games down the stretch, like, I don't know, that's a pretty decent sample. So, like, this can still go in a way where Georgi Merkulov at the end of this year can feel like he got rewarded and got a real look in the NHL. It hasn't happened yet. So I get the frustration. And again, Lysell, I think it's a little different. Like I feel with Lysell, I feel this way about him all the time. Like, you gotta force their hand. You can't get your one look and then go down to Providence and not produce. Like, I would still have him up at some point before the end of the year because I just want to take a look at him. But there's more blame there to put on Fabian Lysell for not doing his part than there is on Georgi Merkulov, who is doing his part.
So, and I don't disagree with you, Scott. Like, Lysell has to do a better job of forcing their hand. I think I'm not convinced he would be in any different situation than Merkulov has to this point, where he has forced their hand at many times. And you're right, he has gotten more opportunity. But when developing younger players, don't you feel like managing people is all about timing? And you and I and everybody can say that Lysell hasn't forced their hand since being sent back down to Providence. And I think we all felt this way at the same time. When he did get his call up, he impacted, and it's been a while, so I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but he had an indirect impact on the opening goal where he didn't get a point, but it was his forecheck or something that led to the Bruins opening goal of the game, a game in which that they won. And at that time, the three of us here all were in agreement, and still are, that why didn't they give him that ensuing game as well? Why not just keep him up for one more game after and at the time, I believe it was said he had like no shots on goal or like he didn't have like a great stat line to, you could make the case he didn't have a great stat line that game, so it was okay to send him back down.
He faded a bit as that game went on. You're right. Like, really strong start. That was his very first shift.
Right.
Like, he didn't keep it up the whole game. I would have still given him a second game.
And that's
right. Like, we were all in agreement on that at the time.
And that's like, it's little things like that kind of annoy me, because he could have been given that second game or third and then faded even more so, and then you send it back down. But to me, when you have a young player and you give him a heads up, probably the day of, or maybe late that day before, that he's going to get his NHL debut, his parents are in town, he's battling nerves. So, it's a tough game to judge somebody anyway, their NHL debut. And I thought he showed himself well and helped impact the game on the score sheet indirectly in a game that they won. And I just felt like sending him right back down after that. Yes, the player has to continue to impress when he gets sent back down, and that's on him. But I just feel like management has done a poor job in certain moments about recognizing and understanding how somebody's psychology can work. And you want to help build off somebody's confidence rather than like just send them right back down. I just felt like that was a mismanagement of the player. We can all blame him from that moment on, but I think that was an opportunity for Sweeney and management to help his cause, and I felt that they didn't. And maybe some of his struggles since then could be because of some, psychological mismanagement there, and we can put blame on Fabian for that, but I'm going to put it on them too. And it's little things that I just feel like that they haven't done a good job managing some of these younger players.
And I remember the conversation at the time that we had as well, is you wanted to see what you had before you made any drastic decisions on. At the time, we were talking about a buying deadline because it was before they really fell below. And obviously there was so much time. So it's like, okay, you need to find out what your needs are and if you have an internal solution, was it the conversation we had. Like, are these guys an internal solution to the gap that you're feeling at right wing? Or center, or, like, is there a role that they can play that you then don't have to go trade for a person like that? And obviously we're at a different point now, but I mean, the season's not over. And I know Sunday when we talk to Razor, it's going to be, his optimism will show up once again and be like, guys, they're 2 points out, or, whatever they are at that point. Like, and there's still time and there's all this, but like, it's hard to be optimistic with McAvoy and Lindholm out. And I think it comes back to that in my mind, that's the main thing, right? Like, even if you can start to pull it together, like, how are you going to go through a playoff run if McAvoy's not back? And like, your top D pair is Zadorov and Carlo. And, like Laura is running the power play, but he's making these mistakes that are leading to goals against and maybe taking points off the table for the Bruins. Like, it's 5 losses in a row. There's not a whole lot of like things to talk about that's showing you that it's going in the right direction right now. So like, I don't want to just be negative, but there's a reason why, and there's still time, but maybe use it to look at some of these guys. Especially, this is another backdrop to all of this is Sweeney the other day at the press conference where he was announcing that Lindholm wasn't going to return, said straight up, the unrestricted free agents who we haven't talked to and got a contract extension with are on the table to get moved at the trade deadline. Like, basically, you're out of here one way or another.
Well,
either.
He didn't quite say that.
Okay, he didn't name names or anything, but he said
he said they're not gonna extend any of them before the deadline, other than maybe Marchand.
It felt like a writing on the wall situation of these guys are not, that they're going to be maybe traded if they can get something for them, which Brazo and Frederick fall there. And when once again, Frederick's injury complicates this, but yeah, there's potentially going to be even more holes if guys do get, like, if the Bruins sell some of these UFAs at the deadline.
Yeah. And again, like, calling up Merkulov isn't throwing in the towel on this season or like, I guess we're just looking ahead to next year. It's like, no, that legitimately might help you right now because you don't have a third line. Like, so just to like reiterate how I feel, like, yes, Merkulov should be up this weekend. He should be playing this weekend because there's just a gaping hole on your third line. Like, it's wide open. Like, why would he not be there? I can't do another game of Riley Tufte on the third line. I can't, guys.
Why should we get to Scott's opening shift now, which we said we were going to talk about way before, but
just real quickly before we do, because this came to my mind and I want to get you guys' opinion on this because we did bring up Poitras earlier and I just want to talk about him quickly. Poitras is an interesting person because he's had so many inconsistent stints in Boston, whether it was his rookie year, getting hurt, well, starting by going to World Juniors, and then he ended up getting hurt, and I think that may have been the year for him. And then this year, he starts off in Boston, gets sent down to Providence for an extended amount of time, and he's been back up since. But how would you guys assess Matt Poitras' growth offensively, defensively, strength-wise from his rookie year to his sophomore year? He obviously had, like, for example, he has 1 goal this year. And I think his first game getting called back up when he went down to Providence, I think it was against Tampa, and he came up and immediately impacted the game offensively. But we haven't seen that from him since. And I felt like last year as a rookie, he had some really good moments offensively, had some confidence. Maybe it was just kind of, rookie confidence. Like, how am I here? I'm just going to have some fun out there. But how would you guys compare and contrast his rookie and sophomore years thus far? And have you been encouraged with his game, his growth, or do you think there's more there to be desired despite him being so young and in the league at this point?
Yeah, I'm definitely encouraged overall. I think he's a better all-around player this year than he was last year, and I think that time in Providence helped him become that. I highlighted the other night, but Tuesday against Toronto, they're protecting a 1-goal lead in the third period against one of the best offensive teams in the league. They shorten the bench to 3 lines, 9 forwards, and he's one of them getting a regular shift. Last year, he's riding pine in that situation. He's not even getting a look. So, and I asked Joe Sacco about that at Thursday's morning skate, and Sacco said, like, I asked him specifically, like, is he earning more trust in those situations? And he said, yes, some of it's still game by game. He said in that game, he had earned it. He thought he played a really good all-around game. He said in other games, someone else might earn it, and he might still be sat. but like he's at least getting looks in those situations now, which he wasn't last year. I think he's still creating some chances. Another thing Sacco said when asked about, his goal scoring, he said he needs to get inside more. He needs to get to the net, put more shots on net. I think from a skill perspective, I hope he spends a lot of time working on his shot this offseason. Because quite frankly, it's a little bit of a weak shot. I think he needs to be in close to beat NHL goalies. If he can get to a point where he's a threat from the high slot or the faceoff dots, that will definitely help his game, because it'll force defenders to challenge him further out, which should open up more passing lanes. Whereas right now, I think some teams are realizing you can kind of sag off him a little bit until he gets inside, because he's really not a threat to score from 25, 30, 35 feet out. So there's still, he's 20 years old. Of course, there's a lot to work on. But overall, I am still encouraged.
Yeah, I would say progress from the first year. We didn't get to see him probably as much as we would have liked to, because he got injured and was out for the rest of the season. Got shut down early and we didn't get a full sample size. We missed out on that, and he maybe missed out on some development that he could have had last year. But this year, I think he's not someone I watch and go, oh man, he just makes these mistakes all the time. Like, he's not perfect, but he's not making dumb decisions with the puck. Oh, like maybe one or two, like here and there. But like by and large, he's making good decisions with the puck. He's making good passes. He's aware of where other players are. He's aware when to just get pucks deep rather than try to make a fancy pass or anything like that. And I think that his IQ was kind of there. That seemed like something he had. And it seems like it's gotten better, I think, as well, just from experience. So yeah, he's got one goal, but he's got a bunch of assists. I think he has 15 points total, right? So, but yeah, he's
11. I think it's 11.
11. Okay, so 10 assists. And yeah, 11 points. And he's still somebody that I think adds an element of creativity and some, like, especially, I mean, he's getting time on the second power play unit right now. Like he's able to come in different roles. He doesn't kill penalties, obviously, but he's an option for your power play to try to get things going. I don't know. I think that I've never really watched his game and thought like, oh, he really was the problem today, or he was part of the problem. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking at it because I think he's in a good position to continue to grow and be a bigger part of the organization in years to come. Like, he's only 20, so maybe we do give him a little bit of a break on certain things. But there's a reason for that. It's because this is him learning on the fly how to be an NHLer and get better.
Yeah, and definitely this is not a part of the problem or part of the solution prompt. He's definitely part of the solution. I think his hockey IQ is great. I think his play without the puck is impressive for a kid his age. I think he's very competitive. I think a lot of the things that Scott said is true. Like, he does have an inability right now to beat NHL goalies from distance. So getting stronger, better shot, more confidence.
What he does have the ability to do is when he gets low, find the right pass through either like low slot, or there's been times where he's maybe forechecked and got a puck against the end boards, popped it right out to Pastrnak, or like popped it from behind the goal line, extended back out in front to somebody that then finishes. So like, he's creating high danger chances for other people, for like as the primary assister, or as the guy who, if they finished it, would have been the primary assister, because of the way that he puts the puck into areas for guys to have those good chances.
Well, last night he makes a really nice play in the defensive zone to spring Brazo and Tufte on a 2-on-1, and Brazo just completely mishandles the puck.
Yeah, he didn't even get a shot off.
On this topic, just some news out of practice, because Sacco just spoke like a few minutes ago. Said Poitras made it through practice well and could be an option for Saturday. They will be bringing up another player before they fly out to Pittsburgh. So
Okay.
as suspected, we'll see who it is. Trent Frederick out of the walking boot already after a couple days.
That's good news for them.
Yeah.
Hey, would you be surprised to learn that Poitras' time on ice per game last year was actually slightly higher than this year?
I guess it doesn't totally surprise me. I feel like he had to be thrown into a little bit more of a bigger role early on last year, especially.
By how much?
It does surprise me because what you said, Scott's true. Like, he's getting more trust in certain situations, but 23-24, he had 33 games played, 5 goals, 10 assists, 15 points. This year, 29 games, 1 goal, 10 assists, 11 points. He was a +4 last year, -3 this year. Yes. And then time on ice. Last year, he had 13 minutes and 24 seconds time on ice per game. And then this year, it's 12 minutes and 59 seconds. So we're only talking like a 30-second difference, but.
Well, that also was because they told him last year he was taking shifts that were too long. Like, I remember one of the adjustments.
Self-inflicted longer time on ice.
No, and also, like, as I suspected, like, they have to throw him into a pretty big role early on. Like, I'm looking at it. His, like, from game number 5 in the NHL, like, he went through a run where he went 16 minutes, 16, 15, 16, 18, 16. Like, we forget just, like, how thin this team was at center to start last year. They really, like, threw him into the fire, and, we're like, sink or swim, kid. And this year, they're just not throwing 16, 17 minutes at him.
So about 35 minutes ago, I wanted to get into Scott's opening shift. We'll do that now. And we'll call this the extra attacker segment of the show. So, look, I'm not going to be hypocritical because last episode I said
Bruins just got scored on. Extra attacker.
Last episode, I mentioned how it'll be game 83 and Marchand, which obviously is only 82 games, and Marchand will be saying, we're almost there. We're just going to keep with it. Well, the very next game, he had post-game commentary that went against that, and he actually was outspoken, was honest about this team and where they're at, and that this team, doesn't mean that if they don't do what they want to do this year, that they can't do what they want to do next year. But to Scott's point earlier, it's a polarizing quote because you have some people saying, well, as a captain, technically you're still not out of the playoffs yet, a couple points out, 22 games to go. What kind of message is that sending to your teammates? And then other people are saying, hey, love the honesty, love the realization of what's going on. I think there's validity to both arguments there, Bridget and Scott. How do you guys feel about Brad's comments? Bridget, I think you already mentioned that you liked it, but if you're a player, a teammate in the room, do you have any problems with what he said, or you guys know what's going on? You're in that room too, right? As a teammate of his?
Everybody knows. Like, they know. Like, they know they lost 5 games in a row. I'm not saying they've given up, but, like, there's still an honest assessment of and he was being optimistic in the long term, I guess you could say. Like, we're gonna go, like, in the off season, and honestly, he didn't say retool, but that's kind of what he was describing, and get reinforcements. I didn't have any issue with what he said. I also don't think, by the way, Scott, you want to just read it again because it's been like 40 minutes since you read it the first time.
Well, yeah, so I won't read the entire quote again, but the crux of it, at the end of the day, we may not achieve what we hope to this year, but that doesn't mean that we can't build for something greater and bring it back next year. So we're going to work every single day to continue to improve and build our game, and we're going to claw and fight every single day to get in the playoffs.
Like, he's talking about getting to the playoffs. Like, it's Twitter. Twitter is always going to be Twitter. And, like, if people be mad about, they probably already didn't think Marchand was a good leader. And then I asked Marchand about what his role is right now as the captain in a team that has 5 games that they've lost in a row, and like just in the situation they're in right now out of a playoff spot. And he said, my thing has always been, I just try to work every day and try to keep the mood upbeat. It's how I've always been. Sometimes you have a quieter group of younger guys and it's just about talking a little bit more and communicating more. And he went on to say, like, I've learned from the other leaders, like, and obviously he's talking about Chara and Bergeron, that they were always the hardest working guys on the ice. So I know I have to be the hardest working guy every day of practice and on the ice in order to make sure I'm doing the right thing as captain and like to lead as a captain as the hardest worker. Also didn't see any issue with that being the answer for how he's planning on leading. And I mean, I don't know. I thought that it was honest. I thought that it was realistic. I liked it better than Sacco's answers. That's just, you know.
He's coaching for his job, so he's gonna say the things that he thinks is like, you know what I mean? He's an interim coach. He's not gonna sit there and say anything other than.
I know, but
it's all politics.
It was I understand that. It was a more of a like satisfying answer when it's more realistic. So Marchand's answer was that.
Yeah, and I also think if you're Marchand, you probably are looking around the room, and I guess maybe I shouldn't guess, but like there's probably some guys who are feeling pretty dejected after 5 straight losses, and it can start like if guys start to think, we're out of it. Like, man, we are going to miss the playoffs where we're 4 points out, and maybe after the weekend you're 6 points out, and like you keep sliding. Well, I think Marchand's also trying to give guys something to play towards where it's like, all right, guys, like we're not focusing just on the standings right now. Like, okay, yeah, we want to win games. We still want to try to make a playoff push, but like we're also playing for building towards next year. And like, I think part of the message is like, prove that you should be part of what we're going to do next year. Like, because there's a lot of guys playing for that too, right? Obviously the pending free agents, if you're here through the deadline, like if you're Justin Brazeau and you don't get traded, don't you want to prove that you can be part of this team next year and make a difference and help and that you're worth re-signing, or even just appeal to another team to show them like you're worth signing instead of like, that guy's just an AHLer and, look, he had a good run, but then he really fell off and was a healthy scratch. Like other guys, Morgan Geekie, keep down the stretch, keep showing that you're a legitimate top 6 forward and that you should be paid as such and that you can play that role in this team and that you're not just going to get, slid back down to the third line or move to another team. Like, I think there's a lot of guys here who have something to play for. Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov. Don't you guys want to build some positive momentum going into your second year? Like, it might be too late to salvage his first year. Everyone's already come to the conclusion that these are bad contracts and, you're a bust and you had a bad year. Well, if you finish strong, can't you carry some momentum to the offseason, build towards next year? Maybe things start to feel a little better. Jeremy Swayman, don't you want to finish the year strong? Like, this isn't what you had in mind for this season. It's not what the Bruins had in mind. There's still an opportunity to build something and feel good going into the offseason. So I think that's kind of what Marchand is talking about too, where it's like, regardless of whether we end up making the playoffs or not, and we're still trying to, we're not giving up, but you want to feel good going to the offseason. You don't want to get there and be like, damn, I had no goals in 1 point in the last 20 games and I was playing 7 minutes a night. Like, you don't feel too good about yourself if that's how your season ends.
Yeah, and this is one you haven't even like brought up, but like all of these losses were 1-goal losses, and David Pastrnak is on fire. Like, don't let him down. Don't let all of his hard work go to waste and continue to lose these games by 1 goal, because once again, Pastrnak is a guy he scores twice against Toronto. He has another good game against the Islanders, like scores in that game, and his point streak just continues. And Marchand's talking about, oh, he should be a front runner for MVP, which, by the way, if people, I understand, like, I don't think everyone understands necessarily what that means. It means he's the most valuable to his team, and he certainly is up there in terms of being most valuable to a team, because he's really, him and Geeky are the guys just dragging everyone along. Like, I think Marchand used the phrase leading the charge. You're that close. If you can just get one other guy to score like in a game, Pasternak's taking care of some of the other stuff. Like, it's not that far off, but also he can't do it himself. And like, there's going to be a few other guys that step up, not even like, even if it's spread out across nights to extend leads, or to maybe even make like a good defensive play. Like, and Swayman did have one really good stop when the Bruins were, I think it was trailing by 1, to keep them in the game before he got pulled for the extra attacker. So you need some more of those from him as well.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned to you guys before recording, and I'm sure you saw it, but Ty Anderson at the Sports Sub said it's the 31st game this year Bruins scored 2 or fewer goals in a game. Obviously, that's just over half of their games this year, and Pastrnak is responsible for probably half of their offense in one way, shape, or form. So, I mean, God, I
can actually give you an exact number on that because I looked it up this morning. Pastrnak has a point on 44.5% of all Bruins goals this season.
That's crazy. I mean, they yeah, insane.
Well, earlier this year, wasn't it like him and Kucherov or someone that were like the 2 highest in like percentage of?
Kucherov's lower. Kucherov's 41.5. Draisaitl's just ahead of him, 45.8. And Nathan MacKinnon leads the league. He's 46.9% of all Colorado goals.
Yeah, I mean, he'll probably win that award. But yeah, Pastrnak.
Draisaitl's going to win.
It's not going to be Pastrnak. But
yeah, so just quickly on that, because I did write about this as part. So I did like 5 thoughts, and did mention like Pasternak's MVP candidacy, and yeah, like raw numbers wise, 73 points is probably a little too far off. McKinnon at 90, Draisaitl 88, Kucherov 86. So, but you can definitely make an argument for him being 4th. Like you can for sure make a case for him being top 5. Obviously, since January 1st, he leads the NHL in goals and points. I mentioned, percentage of goals involved. He has 73 points. Marchand is second on the team at 47. That 26-point gap between first and second on the team, biggest in the NHL. So he's doing it without the support that all these other guys have. And also, we know the Bruins power play is struggle, so he's not racking up points there. 5-on-5 primary points. So goals and primary assists. Pastrnak has 35. Only Draisaitl has more at 38.
Scott, I wonder, and this isn't for you to look up this in this moment, but I'm curious what percentage of the Bruins offense Pastrnak is responsible for since, call it, January, because he actually had a slower start to the year, relatively speaking, for his standards. Yeah. I bet that number is even closer to 50 since January.
I haven't looked it up. I suspect it's probably over 50%.
Yeah,
because he's on a stretch right now where, like, I think he's been involved in like their last 10 or 11 5-on-5 goals.
15-game point streak, by the way, which is
16 now.
16, which is where does that rank in recent Bruins history? Do we know off the top of our heads?
It's the longest since Phil Kessel in 2008 had 18 games straight.
Wow.
And it's the longest in the NHL this season.
I like his chances against Pittsburgh. He always plays well against Pittsburgh, and they're obviously not a great team either this year, so that could climb. All right, Bridget Scott, any final takeaways before we wrap up for the week? No?
No, I know, like, we only barely touched on Swayman, so I won't go too deep, but I didn't like either goal against in the Islanders game. First one's a great shot, and the defense on it is even more of a problem. You rewatch that play, and it's like, why is Pavel Zacha chasing all the way over to Peugeot on the opposite wing instead of just picking up Romanov coming right out of the box next to him?
Scott, can I ask you guys a question real quick? What were you guys thinking? Did you see Zacha? It was in the second period because they were shooting down the far end. Did you see him go on a breakaway and then just go right,
and
pick the left lane? So I'm just
drift all the way to the left.
What was he doing? I know what he was doing. He probably thought Pasta was with him for 2-on-0, and then it was too late for him. But it's like, dude, take the middle of the ice, and that's the sign of somebody who's not playing with confidence. What was that?
It reminded me. So I used to always give my sister a hard time growing up when she played. So we were both always left wings, and my sister would always drift left before shooting. So I'd always call her lefty or left turn, and that's what it looked like. I know my sister listens sometimes. I hope she listens. And
is that why she hurt you? Is that why she hurt you that one time? Didn't you have an injury from a rock or something?
Yeah, she broke my nose with a rock, but I ran her off the road in a bike race and split her lips. So
oh even. God.
Me and my brother have similar stories of retaliation. So,
but I feel like I've never seen that. So Zacha's he's a lefty. He's in the middle of the ice on a break, and then he just literally just goes on the left side of the ice now, takes away any multiple angles for a breakaway opportunity. Even if he was a righty, at least his stick would still be in the middle of the ice. But he just, I don't know what that was, and maybe it was just a brain fart or something from him. But that was just a sign of somebody not having confidence with their game, because anybody else, they're cutting to the middle and they're just going in all alone. And he almost wanted to go for a 2-on-0 or something. And it's like, buddy, just take the ice you have.
I think that's what he was thinking. I think he thought Pastrnak was probably further up than he was.
Exactly.
And he thought, I'm going to make it a longer angle, a wider angle for the pass, and then hit Pastrnak back door. But it just wasn't there. Just take the shot.
Yeah, just take the lane. Okay. Bridget has to go. We will let her do that. Thank you all very much for listening. Try to enjoy some Bruins hockey over the weekend.
Listen to Sunday Skate.
9 o'clock on Sunday.
Yep.
And we'll be back Monday. Have a great weekend. Thanks for listening. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.